Good evening. Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches Eruvin Daf Kuf Aleph, starting at the very top with a new Mishnah. The Mishnah opens Hadeles she b'muktzah, a door that's being used for a storage room. The Meforshim here point out that the door is really not affixed to the wall, as we'll see soon in the Gemara. The chadakim she b'pirtza, and these types of thorn bushes that are being used to close off an opening in a wall, umachatzalos, and mats as well. All of these are different forms of doors. So in all of these cases, a noalin bahem, we're not allowed to use those doors on Shabbos, ela im kain gevohim min haaretz, unless they're elevated from the ground. Rashi, fourth line, dibur hamaschel a noalin ba, b'Shabbos mishum de'avid binyan. It's basically like building something, which you're not allowed to do. It's interesting because it's not in a groove. It's not like we talk about with like the travel Scrabble game where the letters are being put into something. It's not even Legos. Afal Pikain, here, just the leaning up of the door in those cases, that is what is considered to be not allowed. The Gemara is going to now present questions from two brisas. These two brisas are similar to one another. Even so, the Gemara presents both of them as separate questions. Number one, Uriminhu, third line, Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph. Delas hanigreres umachatzelas hanigreres v'kankan hanigrar. If you have a door that's dragging on the ground, a machatzelas, or a mat that's dragging on the ground, v'kankan, Rashi says it's some type of kli, some type of utensil. Bisman shekshurin utluyin. If it's tied up and if it's tuluyin, if it's hanging a little bit, then noalim behen b'Shabbos vein tzarich lomar be'yom tov. So we see that you are noalin behen b'Shabbos. Yet our Mishnah says a noalin behen. So what's the answer? Amar Abaye. Abaye says, B'sheyesh lahem tzir. This is where it has some type of hinge or a hook, some type of hardware that indicates that it could have been, that it was attached to something. Rava Amar b'shehaya lahem tzir. Even if you just see the screw holes, the mark from the tzir, from the hinge, that's also considered sufficient. And similarly, the same type of question from a nearly identical brisa. Meisive delas hanigreres umachatzelas hanigreres v'kankan hanigrar. Same three items. Bisman shekshurin v'tluyin v'gvoen min haaretz afilu malo nima. When they are tied and when they are hung off of the ground, even malo nima, even a hair's breadth, then noalin bahen v'in lave noalin bahen. So we see here that if they're raised up, it's noalin bahen. So I don't understand how that fits with the Mishnah. So it says the Gemara, Abaye matar tzataime, but Rava matar tzataime. Abaye and Rava both give the same answers they gave before. Abaye matar tzataime, he gives two answers here actually. Oh, sheyesh lan sir, oh shegvon min haaretz. Either it was with a hinge or it was raised, the doors were raised off the ground. Rava matar tzataime, shahaya lahen sir, oh shegvon min haaretz. Either that there was in past tense a tzir, a hinge of some kind, or that it's raised off of the ground. Tana Rabbanan, soche coats in, if you have a collection of thorned brush, v'chavilin, and some collection of hay or some other types of things that can be used to clog up a hole in a pirtza of a wall, shehiskinu the pirtza shebechatzer, to close up that broken wall in the chatzer, bisman shekshurnu tuluyin noalim ben b'Shabbos vein tzarich lamar b'yom tov. So there we see the application of this din. The bisman shekshurnu v'tuluyin noalim b'Shabbos, you're allowed to use those doors, and obviously certainly true even on Yom Tov. Tani Rabchia, Delas Almana Hanigreres. What about a Delas Almana? What's a Delas Almana? We'll see in the Gemara momentarily what it is. But his understanding, Rabchia's understanding of a Delas Almana, which is Nigreres, we said Ein Noalin Ba, that's not allowed. Heichi Dami Delas Almana. What is the case of a Delas Almana? Ikada Amrei Dechad Shifa. It was only made with one board. A lot of our doors are made from, not really today, nowadays our doors are made from one thicker slab, or the hollow doors are made from multiple pieces. Their doors were probably made of multiple layers. So this was Dechad Shifa, it was only one layer, it was very, very thin. And that was a very weak door. That's a Delas Almana. Ve'ika de Amre, the less Begishma, it's missing its cross beams to give it the appropriate structure. Either way, the Delas Almana, says Rav Chia, is Ein Noalin, but that is considered muktzah as well. Amar Rav Yehuda, halfway down Kuf Aleph Amar Aleph. Amar Rav Yehuda, hay medurta, if a person's going to make a medura, they're going to make, Rashi says, a hesek gadol, you're going to make a bonfire. Mimala lamata mutter. You should hold the brush that you want to put on top of the fire up, and then they should build underneath you. Not a normal way to structure things, but that would make this mutter. But if you did mimata lamala, then that would be aser, that would not be allowed. Also for cooking eggs on Yontif, Rashi, the last short line of Rashi, 2/3 of the way down, Rashi dibur hamaschel b'chein be'asa writes, l'sader habeitzim al hagechalim al kli barzel shekorin gradil, a griddle. This is where we get the word from, presumably from the past tense, the past French word of gardil. You're going to try and cook them inside some type of pan. So what you have to do, you have to hold it up and build the wood underneath it. Kidra, hold up the pot, have people build underneath it. All of this is, of course, on Yontif. Puria, even a bed, if you want to hold up the bed, and then people can stack books underneath. Chavisa, barrel as well. All of these cases have the same din. This is kind of placed in here, even though it's not directly related to what we're doing or what we're talking about. And nevertheless, if you wanted to build these things, you have to hold up the top item first and then build underneath them. Maybe it's a shino. You have to get into the Rishonim as to why that's the case, but that is in fact the case. Continuing the Gemara halfway down, a brief story until we get to the Mishnah. Amar le'ahim mina Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, a min and apikores, a heretic, said to Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, Chedka, you're a thorn person. You're a thorn person. What does that mean? It says about you Jews, Tovam kechedek, the good ones of you are still thorns. Amar le, Shatya, you're a fool. Shvil l'seifei dekra, go read the rest of the pasuk. Dechsiv yashar mi misuka, you are considered more straight than misuka. What is misuka? So Rashi here, I didn't mark it off. Rashi here, Yashar Misuka, it's about 15 to 20 lines from the bottom. He says, Hayasharim Shebanu, Maginin Aleinu Kisuka. The Yashar ones among us protect the others like a sukkah does, a person from the outside elements, from the sun, whatever the case may be. What then, if that's what your pshat is, then what then does it mean when the pasuk says Tovam Kechedek, Keshem Shechadakim Halalu, Maginan Ala Pirza, just like these branches, this collection of thorns is used to block a pirza in a chatzer, so too, kach tovim shebanu maginin aleinu, so too the great among us, they protect the others. So this is somewhat of the idea where we see that the gedolim are the ones who are magine hador. They're the ones, we say this all the time, zechuso yagen aleinu. Zayin Yud Ayin, you'll see this sometimes after a person was niftar, after a great person was niftar, zechuso yagen aleinu. So this person was kechedek. They're maginin ala pirza davar acher. 3 lines before the Mishnah. Another pshat in the pasuk. What does tovam kechedek mean? Shemahad kenes harishayim legehenim. This is where we crush down the rishayim in Gehenim. And the pasuk from Micha, this is part of a nevuah. The pasuk reads as follows: Kumi vadoshi vas Tzion. You're going to get up and you're going to crush the children of Tzion. Ki karnech asim barzel ufarsosayich asim nechusha. Your horns and your parsa, your feet, I'm going to make them into strong metal. Vahadikos amim rabim, and you'll be able to crush down the nations. Gomer. Same idea that we will be able to be mahadik the Rishaim in Gehenim. 2/3 of the way down, a new Mishnah. The Mishnah writes, Lo yamod adam birshus hayachid, the yiftach birshus harabim. A person should not stand in a private place, reach into the outside public domain to open something that's not allowed, and vice versa as well. Birshus harabim, the yiftach birshus hayachid, that's also not allowed. Elohim kain asmachitza gvasar tvachim divrei Rab Meir. Now, if you'll recall from a few nights ago, from a few blot ago, we learned that there was a distinction between the Rabbanon and Rab Meir. This is the Rab Meir that we're talking about, where we see that Rab Meir was gozer in such cases, afal pi, that it's not a malacha d'oraisa, because you're not doing a hakira and you're not doing a hanacha, you're not doing both of those things. Nevertheless, we see that he is strict, and this is a rabbinic injunction. Amrulo, the Chachamim said back to him, how can that be that that's true? Ma'aseh b'shuk shel tamim. Shuk shel tamim, this is a place where there are a lot of butchers. You can think maybe Machane Yehuda, something along those lines. Shahayu b'Yerushalayim, shahayu noalim, umanichen es hamaftech bechalon she'al gabe hapesach. There we saw that they were Noel, and they left the key on the windowsill. So Rabbi Meir, you can't be right. Rabbi Yossi agrees, but with a different application. Omer, shuk shel tzmarim hayad, a different type of shuk that sold different things. Semer is wool. So fine, different applications, but they both clearly disagree with the Tanakama. Rabbi Meir was strict. He had a rabbinic injunction against these cases. Yet we see in the Seif of the Mishnah that they do not agree with him. The Gemara has a very, very hard time with the flow of our Mishnah, because the beginning of our Mishnah, Reb Meir was showing us his rabbinic injunction in a case where you have a Rishus HaYachid and a Rishus HaRabim, 2 Rishuyos D'Oraisa. However, the continuation of the Mishnah and the seeming rejection of Reb Meir by the other Tanaim was talking about a Carmelist, V'Rabbanan. What are you talking about, Rabbanan? How is it that somebody asked you a question, what color is it? And you said the number 4. You're not answering the right question. Why? V'Rabbanan, 6 lines from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Meir, Rishus HaRabim. Rabbi Meir was talking about a case of Rishus HaRabim. Umehadru inhu Carmelis. And you said, oh, we disagree because of a, we're not, he's not talking about a Carmelist. He's talking about a Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim. So mehecha teisi that your argument is even relevant. You're not even on the same playing field as him. The Amar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rav Yochanan, Yerushalayim El Mali Dal Soseh Ninalas Balayla. We've seen this Gemara before, I think a couple of times. By Yerushalayim, Il Mali Dal Soseh Ninalas Balayla. If not for the fact that that would have been the case, it would have been a Rishus HaRabim, but it's not. It's a Carmelist v'haraya. That the case of the Rabbanan at the end of the Mishnah is talking about a Carmelist, and our question against the Rabbanan stand: how can you respond to Rav Meir when Rav Meir is talking about a Rishus HaYachid and a Rishus HaRabim to say, I don't agree with you because of Carmelist? That's apples and oranges, no comparison. Amar Rav Papa explains the seeming contradiction. We'll see a second answer shortly. Here's answer number one. Amar Rav Papa, kan kodem shenifritzu ba pratzos, kan la'achar shenifritzu ba pratzos. It depends. There were times when there were no pratzos in the walls of Yerushalayim, and in those cases, you're taka right. It's talking about a Carmelist. However, kan la'achar shenifritzu ba pratzos. But once there were breaks in the walls that were greater than 10 amos, so then that pirza ruins everything, and then you taka got a problem. That could be a Rishus HaRabim. Okay, but that's the answer of Rav Papa. Rava Amar Seifa Asa'an L'Sha'arei Gina. Really, there's something missing in our Mishnah, and it's missing from the Shita of Rav Meir, and we need it to teach us about the case of Sha'arei Gina. We'll speak about a Sha'arei Gina more on the Amud Beis, but for now, a Sha'arei Gina is basically like a small entryway. Sometimes like when you go into a restaurant, there's like the door before the door. It's a small space, a couple feet by a couple feet. I think it became state law. I'm pretty sure it became state law here. So you'd go into a restaurant, there's a little bit of an entryway, and then you go into the restaurant. So if you were going to go into your gan, you may have had the wire fence all the way around. But to get in, there was a little bit of a portal. That's a Sha'arei Gina. We'll speak about this more. B'hachi Ka'amar, and Rava says we need to re-understand our Mishnah entirely. Primarily, we need to re-understand Rav Meir. We asked the question against the Rabbanan. I don't understand. How could you respond to Rav Meir, Carmelist, when he was talking about Rishus HaRabim? So what the Gemara now says within Rava is that we were missing a piece of Rav Meir. What did Rav Meir say? Rav Meir was of the opinion that v'chein lo, this is the last two lines, v'chein lo ya'amod b'rishus hayachid v'yivtach b'karmelis. We need to add this into the Mishnah. V'chein, and similarly, just like by a rishus hayachid and a rishus harabim, Rav Meir was strict, he also had the same injunction by a Carmelist, which was a din derabanan. V'chein lo ya'amod b'rishus hayachid v'yivtach b'karmelis v'yivtach b'rishus hayachid. And that's why the Gemara now makes sense, because really Rav Meir had two dinim. He had the dinim that we see in our brisa, in our Mishnah, and we have what Rava inserts now into Rav Meir. Rav Meir said two things. He didn't say one. He said Rishus Hayachid, Rishus Harabim. Then he adds in the case of Carmelis, and both of them have the same din of the rabbinic injunction of Rav Meir. Ella, turning to the top of Kufal Amud Beis, Ella Yimkain, when would it be mutter? This is just the rest as a quote from our Mishnah. Now, when the Chachamim respond in not agreeing with the Shita of Rav Meir, now it makes sense, because Rav Meir said not only Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, but also Carmelis. Now comes along the Chachamim, second line, Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, Amrlo, Maisa b'shuk b'shel tamim, Shahib Yerushalayim, Shahayu Noalim, Umanichim Samatech b'chalon, Shal Gabe HaPesach. Rav Yossi Omer Shuk Shal Tzmar. The rest of the Mishnah is the same, just to say I disagree with you in regards to the Rishus, in regards to the Rishus of the Carmelis. That's not true. The Rishus of the Carmelis we treat differently. And that's where the machlokes, says Rava, lies between Rav Meir and the Chachamim, in that the only machlokes is by a Carmelist, but not by a Rishus HaYachid and a Rishus HaRabim. Let's dig into the Sha'arei Gina. 2 dots, 5 lines down, Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. This will take us to the Mishnah. Says the Gemara as follows: Tana Rabbanon, Pischei Sha'arei Gina, the opening of the Sha'arei Gina. Remember, as mentioned, it's like that entryway into a restaurant, a small portal to get into the Gina, into the garden. Bisman sheyesh lehen beis shar mibifnim posech v'noel mibifnim. If on the inside of that portal, inside the garden, so you have your opening, and then there's a small little living space. So you have kind of two places to be in. One is the Sha'arei Gina, and the second is a small place to sleep in. So if while you're standing inside the Sha'arei Gina, there's a beis shar inside, still another room, then then I can stand inside I could stand inside the Sha'arei Gina and then unlock into the next room. That would be totally appropriate. No carrying there. That's fine. Mi bachutz. If in fact the place to sleep was outside, so then what should you do? Poseach v'noel mi bachutz. So then you should stand in the outer in the outer chamber to open the inner portal. That would be appropriate. Mikan v'kan. What if on each side of the shargina you have a place that a small room? So then posech v'noel kan v'kan, you can open from both ends. Ein lahen lo lakan v'lo lakan. If it was only the portal, that small opening, and then everything else to the outside was reshus harabim, to the inside was the gan. So then asurim kan v'kan. You can't use the key anywhere. And then says the Gemara, a key line, and this is really going to carry the day today. All of this is part of the same brisa. So let's continue what the brisa says. V'chein, and similarly, chanuyos hapsuchos l'reshus harabim. The cases of the shari hagina, says the Gemara, says the brisa, seemingly are similar to the case of v'chein chanuyos, which are open to reshus harabim. Bisman shehamin o lemata me'asara, when this little opening space in front of the chanus, in front of the store, when the little space, which again, the same portal, you have one in front of a store, bisman shehamino lemata me'asara, if that opening space is not its own reshus, in the previous part of the brisa, it was its own reshus, 10 by 4 by 4. In this case, we're saying it's less. So then maybe maftech me'erev Shabbos u'manicho be'iskupa, we put the key on an iskupa, which has a din of a carmelis, lemachar posech v'noal lemachzir le'iskupa, then you can go and open the portal because it's all the same. It's all a carmelis, no problem at all. Uvizman shehamino lemala me'asara, but when the portal to get to the store is in fact 10, then what should you do? Maybe maftech me'erev Shabbos u'manicho b'mino. You should put it inside that little antechamber, inside that small room. Lamachar posech v'no lemachziro lemakomo divrei Reb Meir. And the next day, you're allowed to open it and then put it back where you got it from. And that is the shita of Reb Meir. Reb Meir seems to have gone back on his initial opinion of a rabbinic conjunction. Here we don't seem to have one. The Gemara will say that explicitly before we close out today. The Chachamim omrim, in that brisa, the Chachamim argue and say no. Even when the min'ol, when the little room is its own space, it's 10 by 4 by 4, still, maybe maftech me'erev Shabbos ha'manicho be'iskupa, there you can even put it on a carmelis, afal pi, that the min'ol, the shari gina, as it were, the room before the chanus, has a din of a carmelis, because the chachamim did not hold of the rabbinic conjunction that Rav Meir held of. Remember, that was what they argued, that by a carmelis the din doesn't apply. So here too we see that application. Lamachar, what would the chachamim say you would do the next day with this key? What you would do is poseach v'noah l'machzir l'makomo. You would take it from the iskupa, go unlock the door and put it back where you got it. O bechalon shal gabi hapesach. You could put it there too as well. So then the Gemara has to analyze what it's talking about. Im yesh bechalon arba al arba aser. However, if the windowsill has a 4 by 4 area, that's a problem. That's a makom chashuv. That would make it aser. Because then it's too strong of an isser of you can't just put it down on the windowsill. It's too big of it's a chashuv. That's a hanacha. That space is too big. You're not allowed to put it down there. And then the Gemara analyzes the brisa. So the brisa is over, and here is how we would analyze the brisa. Because we see that the case of the chanuyos, the case of having a small antechamber in front of a chanus, and that is then similar to the case of the shari gina. Because that's the case, says the Gemara, we're just about halfway down. Kuf aleph and beis midika amar v'chein chanuyos michlal debi iskupas karmelis askinan. We are seemingly talking about a case which is an iskupas karmelis, which is only a karmelis space. And if that's the case, it seems that Rav Meir changed his tune. Let's talk about that more in a minute. Hi minol hechidami. What was the size of the minol of the antechamber before the chanus? Says the Gemara, the lesbe arba makom turhu. If it was less than the 10 by 4 by 4 requisite amount to make it its own shear, nothing doing. That would make it a makom tur. The isbe arba, and if it is a space that's 10 by 4 by 4, then how can the chachamim be so lenient? Beha lema rabbanon. Here the rabbanon would say, and this is a lengthy quote, but it's a quote from the brisa that we saw above. Is this where the rabbis would say their opinion of quote, af bizman shehamino lamala miyud, even when the antechamber room before the chanus is greater than 10, maybe Pesach me'erev Shabbos, maybe Maftech, me'erev Shabbos, umanicho be'iskupa, you'd be lenient there. That's mamish hashinui rishus. And then lamachar posech v'noel bo machzir le'iskupa olechalon shal gabi pesach, end quote. That's where you're going to show your leniency. It's too lenient because the space that you're talking about is mamish rishus hayachid. It's not a carmelis to a carmelis anymore. Says the Gemara, v'hama kamatal, tell me carmelis rishus hayachid. You're carrying from the iskupa onto the windowsill, which is mamash rishus hayachid. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to put it down there. That's totally not allowed. It's one thing to hold the key and unlock the door and put it back. Here you're putting it down on the windowsill. That has to be aser. So it says the Gemara, Amar Abaye le'olam de'ein bo arba. Really, you're right. really the space is smaller. The space is not 4x4. However, there is a theoretical space to carve out. We've spoken about this idea before, which is referred to as chokakin lahashlim. Chokakin lahashlim is a din that we have by the world of mezuzah. And let's say, and we've given this example before, let's say you had an arched doorway. So if you could be chokakin lahashlim to cut out what in theory would be a mashkov, so then you might be chayiv in mezuzah. If you hold of chokakin lahashlim, do we look at the theoretical possibility to cut out the archway and make it rectangular to put a mezuzah on the top right of the door? Yes, no, maybe. So that's a machlokes here. We have the same machlokes here as well. So here the din says abai la'olam de'ein bo arba. Really, the chachamim, we're not talking about a case that was a real rishus hayachid. There, the minol, the space to unlock the door in front of a chanus was less than 10 by 4 by 4. So that should be a makom patur. No, because here we have the question of chokakin lahashlim. So here, uveha pligi, here's the machlokes. To Rav Meir savar chokakin lahashlim. Rav Meir was machmir because of his concern of chokakin lahashlim. V'rabbanan savre ein chokakin lahashlim. To close out for the evening, Amar Rabibi bar Abaye Shma Mina Mehamas Nisa Tlas. I learned 3 things from the brisa that we have learned on this Amud Beis. Shma Mina Chokakin Lahashim, that Rav Meir holds of Chokakin Lahashim. Ushma Mina Hadar Be Rav Meir Misharei Gina, that his shita has changed from Sharei Gina, because we see in a chanus that even though that it's a Carmelist, that Rav Meir had a different shita that he did in our Mishnah. He changed his mind. Shamas mina midrabanan isa l'derabdimi. We also see from this story that the Rabbanan hold like the shita of Rav Dimi. Tichiyasa Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi showed up, Amar Rav Yochanan, he quoted from Rav Yochanan, Makom she'ein bo arba al arba. Remember our ukimta. We established in the brisa that we were dealing within the chachamim of a minhol, this space before the chanus. We were dealing with a space that was less than 4 by 4. And what was the case there? Now look at Rav Yochanan back in the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yochanan, Makom she'ein bo arba al arba. Mutter livnei rishus harabim ulivnei rishus hayachid lekatef halav uvilvad shelo yachlifu, as long as they don't switch over. So what do we see from there? That the Rabbanan hold of the shita of Rav Dimi. We'll stop here. In Yirtzeh Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up with Daf Kuf Beis and Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, or some mixture thereof. We'll have to see how much time I have tomorrow, and we will pick up then. Wishing you all a beautiful night.